want. Happy Monday. I hope everyone who's watching now and in the future is having a good Monday. I know I'm having a good Monday. I'm excited to talk to my guest today. So of course I'm having a good Monday. I went to BroadwayCon this weekend. I've attended every in-person BroadwayCon up until this point, but this was my first time volunteering. So that was really, really fun. I didn't get to spend too much time at the con itself just because I was busy doing lots of other things, but it was so awesome to see so many new people getting involved and getting so excited about BroadwayCon and being around other theater people and all that good stuff. So yeah, I highly recommend it. But happy Monday, and let's go ahead and get started. So this is episode 37, and my guest today is an assistant professor at Villanova University. She is a theater theorist, historian, and practitioner. Her work focuses on what she terms affective stage directions, which are stage directions written in ways that engage the physical and emotional responses of future theater makers. Her book, The Lines Between the Lines, How Stage Directions Affect Embodiment, was published by the University of Michigan Press in October of 2021. Her next project stems from the work with the Transfeminisms Working Group at the American Society for Theater Research, where she and her collaborators take up important issues of trans and non-binary representation in theater and performance. While pursuing her doctorate at CUNY, she was the recipient of the Andrew W. Mellon Fellowship in Public Humanities, as well as a Graduate Center Dissertation Fellowship. She's a member of the Actors Equity Association and has studied acting at Michael Howard Studios, the Berkshire Theatre Festival, and the Gaiety School of Acting in Ireland. She has directed, stage managed, and even done a little playwriting. She also works as an intimacy choreographer and continues to train with theatrical intimacy education. She also serves as the performance review editor of the Eugene O'Neill Review and the conference planner for the American Theater and Drama Society. Her avid interests include stage directions, gender and sexuality theory, female playwrights, Irish theater, and theatrical riots. I've been so lucky to learn from my guest inside the classroom and out, and also to have her as a friend. She always has the best recommendations of plays to read and shows to see that you have definitely never heard of, and that will ultimately become some of your favorites. So without further ado, this is Dr. Bess Rowen.
That was the best introduction anyone's ever given me. I would like that to be on the record forever. And also, you're now coming around with me wherever I go to introduce me. Thank you so much, Lora. That was lovely. I'm sorry I gave you so much to read.
No, that's okay. If anything, I was like, I realized the font was a little small on my end. So I'm like, I'm not skipping a line, am I? So no, that was my fault, not yours.
No, you didn't skip anything. You didn't skip anything. No. But it's one thing when you see it written, and it's like another thing when you're sitting here and someone's reading it, and you're like, that's long.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
But you did it beautifully. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me here. Yeah, I'm delighted to talk with you and always to talk with you, whether or not we're being recorded. Exactly. I'm super excited to see where this conversation goes. Yeah. We always have fun, whether or not empanadas are involved. So yes, exactly. Right? That
if they're there, it's just a bonus.
Yeah, truly. Never turn down an empanada. That's my first rule for life.
No, that's a good one. That's a good one. And I know you just got back from doing theater conference things. Are you back in New York now?
Yes, I am currently in New York. Yeah, I'm here till the end of the month when I go to another theater conference, which is in Detroit. So that will be my first time in Detroit. I just came back from Boston. This is a lot of cities for me in one. And then I'll be back to Pennsylvania, which is not a city.
Exactly.
But I don't live in a city in Pennsylvania. So
yes, exactly. And I always like to give context for guests as to how I know, or people watching, context about how I know my guests. And usually it's Wagner, but sometimes it's Villanova. And today it gets to be Villanova. And I'm so happy about that. You were my professor for Vision and Form, which was a class learning theories and for studying plays and developing our own research. And I learned so much in that class, obviously about theories and research, as I should because I was taking the class, but also about like how academics works, because I feel like in undergrad, I had zero clue about how theater scholarship and conferences research and things like that worked. So thank you for that. Like, there's no question involved. Just like, thank you for that. Cause again, like in undergrad, I'm like, you do theater. theater academics don't really even come up always in undergrad.
No, I didn't know they existed in undergrad. Yeah. So, I mean, truly, that's quite normal. And I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I think part of the work of that class is also being like, by the way, here's what a working theater scholar and practitioner can do. Yeah. You know, again, it is like so much else in the theater, which is one of the reasons I love it. There are many paths, right? Like it's not kind of, you know, people for a long time were like, you're getting a PhD in theater. And they're like, so you want to act on Broadway?
And you're like,
I was like, no. But I can't blame them, because who tells you what that is? Like, nobody tells you what that is. It didn't exist 50 years ago. So, you know, it's fair. And so I try to be really transparent with what I'm doing, conferences, writing, things like that, because that way you can see, here's one way that someone does it. And if that really appeals, then you know that, okay, that's a thing I can do.
Yeah. So and
that's one of the reasons I share that.
Totally. And I hope that, like, with the development of like theater academia and things like that, that it starts to come up more in undergrad programs. Cause I feel like there's a fair amount of people who would like definitely be like, oh yeah, that's the kind of theater that I want to do. Cause I don't have to necessarily like be there, be like in the room, so hands-on like that, but get to write about it. But you just don't know that it exists.
Totally. And some of that really goes down to, like, when I think about what my understanding of that was as an undergrad, as you know, but people might not know watching, I went to Lehigh University, and I never had any PhD theater professors. They were all MFAs, and I had an excellent theater education. That's not anything to, you know, shake a foot at or something. But just to say that I didn't have it modeled for me really until I got to NYU for my master's, what a PhD in theater and performance could look like. So I think that's part of it too, is like, there aren't a ton of us. So not every school has PhDs teaching undergrads. Yeah. And, you know, that's fine. Every school is different. And I teach undergrads at the moment, I teach them acting. So that really doesn't tell them, you know, what my research is. I love teaching acting, but it's different. Yeah. So, I hope that, you know, as we become kind of better at understanding and being open with our students about what the different pathways are to be a professor, that comes up a bit more. Because I agree, I would have been jazzed as an undergrad. I just didn't know that was a thing. Right.
And it like kind of along the same line, but slightly different. You were also on my thesis defense committee, and like I was acting it, you know, like I was acting. That wasn't like a paper, but it's
you
so
did
funny
write a paper though.
I mean, true. That's true. I guess in the thought of like I wasn't writing like a theory paper about like it was more of just like defending the thing that you watched instead, if that makes
sense. Yes, no, it totally does. But one of the things I loved most about you in class was, and outside of class in the world, is like, when this works well, you know, one of the things I say in Vision and Form is, when it works well, the theory is like a toolkit that you apply to whatever you're doing. Right. So, you know, you don't, hopefully, and I do remember from our conversation that some of these theoretical things did come up, even though you didn't write about them. Yeah. Once you think like that, it's easy to kind of introduce them into a lot of things about your life. They give you language for something you might already have been thinking about. And that's my jam. Like, I love discussing that. And I love, you know, when we're talking about something, I can be like, you know, that reminds me of this person who said this theoretical thing, but isn't that kind of the same thing we're talking about now? And you're also such a delight to watch on stage that I love being on acting theses, but yours was very fun.
Thank you. So kind of getting to like the heart of what Overtures is, and this part of the interview, how did you first get started in theater?
Oh boy, that's such an interesting story. So I tell this story a lot, actually, because I'm going to preface this by saying that I defend Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats, and this is why. I know a lot of people, I have been in many an argument with people who are like, Cats is the worst thing that's ever happened to theater. And listen, I hear you. Also, I have seen so many plays at this point, like, fight me. I don't care what you think about my piece. But also, my foundational theater memory, my parents used to go to they're New Yorkers. They used to take me to the theater when I was very little. My mom did some musical theater when she was younger. She always said I was a singer who could act, not vice versa. But it's good to know what you're good at.
Yeah.
But so they took me to matinees when I was very little. And so one of my foundational memories in life is sitting in the audience of Cats. We had an aisle seat and my mom sat me in the aisle. And there's a moment when the Cats come off stage and I was like rapt. I was watching the stage. I must have been 3, right? Mm-hmm. 2 or 3. And I was watching the stage and my mom tapped me on the shoulder and was like, look next to you. And I like look next to me and there's a cat, like there's one of the actors
just like right there.
And who looks at me and waves, which was very nice. And I was just like, that's a job that a person gets to do.
Yeah.
A person gets to do this every night. And this week, and it blew my mind. And I dressed up as a cat at home. Like I had like a homemade 80s Cats outfit. And I would like pretend to be in the show. And so, I always loved to perform. I did theater all through high school. We didn't have it in middle school and high school.
Yeah.
And I went on to college. I thought I was going to be a medical doctor. And so I applied to Lehigh pre-med. And then I arrived and I was like, the first thing I'm going to do on campus is audition for whatever play they're doing. And I auditioned for Midsummer Night's Dream and got cast as Fairy number 3. They
didn't like not even the names, just like
no. It was Fairy number 3. We named it ourselves, but no, it didn't have a name. I had like 3 lines in it, but I just fell in love with it. I had so much fun. And I declared my theater major my freshman year, which is early at Lehigh. And then I declared my English major that same year. And I acted a ton. I directed a little, but I didn't like that as much. I hung lights. I did some playwriting.
Yeah.
I stage managed. I really loved it. And we started getting to the end of my college journey. And I was like, I think I want to be an actor. But I don't really know like what the path for that is. And that was scary. Like I wanted to, and then I didn't get cast my senior year. And I was like, if I can't get cast at Lehigh, this is probably not what I should be doing.
Right.
And I loved to act, but it actually wasn't my favorite thing about theater.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about theater was being in the room, like in any capacity. And I thought acting was fun. I liked to perform, but I loved the whole thing. And what I was afraid of with something like an MFA was that I would have to pick one track. Right. And I didn't want to pick one track. I wanted to do all of it. So turns out I had a GPA that was high enough for this thing called the Presidential Scholarship at Lehigh, which allows you to stay for a 5th year for free. Mm-hmm. And so I completed my degrees, but you have to complete your degrees, but then you can do whatever you want. So I directed Sarah Ruhl's Dead Man's Cell Phone. I fell in love with that play. And a random, and I say random because he was a staff member. I didn't know him super well, but he was in the theater department. And he was like, you should look at an MA in performance studies because you like all these things. And you like theory. Like I was taking an English theory class.
Yeah.
It's like, you might like this. And so I looked into it. I didn't know anything about it. Had not thought about grad school that wasn't an MFA. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, this actually sounds super cool. Like, guess I'll apply. And that was kind of the end of the plan, was like, I will apply. And the English department and the theater department both helped me prepare stuff for that.
Yeah.
And I got in and I showed up, and it could have gone horribly because no one really knows what performance studies is until you show up.
Right.
And I just fell in love with it. I was obsessed with New York. I was obsessed with all of these theories and these cool people I was meeting. And very quickly I was like, oh, I want more of this. So that means I apply to a PhD. That's what that means. The one thing I skipped here is that I randomly, as a 5th year, was like, I kind of want to, my friend had asked one of our professors if she could be an apprentice acting teacher, just basically like an assistant or like a TA, but for acting classes. And my professor had told my dear friend, no, not this semester. And she was upset about that. And I was like, I get that, but I don't know why she's saying no right now. And so I went to ask her and say, actually, I think that's a good idea for me, but not for this semester, because I know you're not accepting anyone for this semester. And she was like, no, you can do it this semester. And I was like, well, that's awkward because you just and she couldn't.
Yeah.
And I, to this day, still think that was a great opportunity for me. It really wasn't a misunderstanding of my friend's ability. But I got to teach acting with her. And she actually let me teach a couple classes by myself as a fifth year, which was wild and kind of unheard of. And I helped her grade. Like, I was very interested in all of it. And she was like, this is a good fit for you. And I was like, really? I don't know. Like, I loved it, but I was like, I don't know. And so, and then I got into PhD saying that I was super interested in stage directions, which had started from being obsessed with Sarah Roll in undergrad.
Yeah.
And so I got a PhD at CUNY, the Graduate Center, had an amazing time there, got applied right after getting my PhD to this visiting assistant professorship at this school called Villanova. And I was like, I know Pennsylvania already, slightly different part of Pennsylvania, but
you're like, I got this.
I was like, I know PA, good. I'll have a Wegmans again. That was literally, I was very excited. Prospect of a Wegmans. But so I got that. I didn't know anyone there. I got that job. I was supposed to be visiting for 3 years, but instead it was 4 because of COVID. And then this past year, I applied for the job a version of the job I was already doing, and got it. And now this is my first year that I'm starting as a tenure track professor officially. But they've counted 2 of my previous years, toward tenure, which is nice.
That's wonderful. I did not know that part. So that's super
exciting. So the book counts, which we're very excited about.
Yes.
The royal we, I'm excited about it. But so that's kind of how I ended up. And I love so much that I get to teach acting. It feels very full circle to me that I get to teach acting at Villanova. And understandable. It is one of my favorite things about that job is that so often you're pigeonholed as a theater scholar and you're not a practitioner, but like every theater scholar I know pretty much started because we fell in love with theater. So that's my trajectory. That's how I ended up here. And I'll say one more thing and then
you're good.
Your response. There's a professor that I had at CUNY, Marvin Carlson. He wrote Ghosting, the thing about ghosting, the haunted stage. And I've sometimes been lucky enough to be at the theater with him. He's in his 80s and he's got a book called 10,000 Nights at the Theater because we're guesstimating that's how many plays he's seen and remembers.
Oh my gosh.
And when you see him at the theater, he is as excited as if it was his first ever time at the theater. And I love more than anything watching senior scholars who are that excited because I think we all worry, or I worry sometimes one day this is going to get old, and it's never gotten old for me.
Yeah.
And I see these people who it's it is a little bit like a drug where you're still looking for the better hit.
Right.
It takes more to get the blood pumping than it used to. But I still find it so insanely exciting. And I will never forget sitting and watching the first VSMT showcase in one of our theater spaces in the Mullen at Villanova post-COVID. I'd never seen anything live in that space. And they started to sing and I started to get choked up because I was like, they're acting. We missed this. I think 2 years or a year and a half was the longest I'd ever gone in my life without seeing a show ever.
100% same. 100%.
So it's nice to, listen, there's a lot that's not nice about COVID, but I do think that it does put into perspective how much we need the theater. And the theater is the only art that's been constantly dying for 2,000 years and yet still here and getting people excited. So I think we all had kind of a moment of actually.
No, 100%.
About this a lot.
100%. 100%. And I love hearing that you literally tried everything going through and doing all of this. Because one of the things I always ask as part of this show, because it's the title of it, but your overture moment or that light bulb of you're oh, I'm going to do this. And it's so fun to hear like some people who are like, yeah, I figured that out in high school, or like, yeah, the first time I ever stepped on a stage was it. And like for you, it's like literally at Cats.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like,
yeah,
this is the thing.
I'm like, I love that so much.
Well, and here's back to my full circle point about Cats. People make a lot of fun of Cats. And listen, is it a brilliant play? No, it's not. No, but
it's fun.
You know, I was sitting around at a table at the grad center one time, and I was talking to 4 people, and all of us PhDs, all of our first theater memories were Cats. And you know what? There's something to be said. And I guarantee if you did this study of how many people saw Cats and then became a PhD, or like live their lives in the theater somehow, I gotta say there's some sort of connection.
It's kind of high.
Not for everybody, but like that's a lot of people.
I didn't see it live until the most recent revival, but like I grew up on the VHS Pro Shot.
Listen, the VHS Pro Shot with the heavy side, the tire lifting up moment and those graphics.
Incredible.
Unbelievably awesome.
Insane.
And I gotta say, went back and saw the live one recently and was like, you know what? I still
love it.
I still love it. I can sing the songs, like the songs are hummable. I will defend it. Like I will defend it.
100%.
That Phantom, because you don't need to know anything to understand those stories. And I think that's also why young people can see it, right? Because Phantom's a little scary for probably really young people, but I didn't see that till I was older. But Cats, like, I think there's no plot, so it's like it's like a kids show in a lot of ways. But it's also, you need to be a triple threat in order to be in Cats. There's actually not a lot of shows that we require that of anymore.
It's true. It's like insane how much of a triple threat you have to be for Cats. Like I did a dance workshop once in it, and I was like, I'm dead. I'm dying. Like this is so the end.
Dancing. Yeah,
it's so much.
With like a bunch of crap on the stage too. Like there's a lot of stuff happening in that.
And maybe a rake, depending. Like it's
and maybe leg warmers and like stuff that's really maybe not moving so great, like in various forms of spandex.
It's so funny. I knew you did acting, but it wasn't until I read your bio when you emailed it to me that I was like, I didn't know that you were your equity. And I was like, that's awesome.
So that was like my original. When I figured out that I really loved theater, every summer of my college experience, I did a summer program. So Michael Howard Studios in New York City was the first one that had like in-depth. I did everything from clown to sense memory to, hardcore scene study. And then I was an apprentice at the Berkshire Theater Festival. And that's where I started. I got my EMC card because I understudied a show that was happening there. And then I didn't do anything for a while, but open access opened up. And so then when this all started, because I had done like, then the next year after the Berkshire Theater Festival, which is now the Berkshire Theater Group.
Yes.
But I still call it the festival because that's what it was when I was there. I went to Ireland and I had some in-depth study there, which was amazing. But, I had done a bunch of scenes. I had done a bunch of plays, but not professionally. So I really just had these equity weeks sitting there. And then when they did open access during COVID, I was like, you know what? That's something I've always wanted. Well, I kept saying, I was like, they never expire. I'm going to go back and do it. Like, I just need a minute. Like I hadn't had a minute. So I was like, no, I really care about the union. I believe in the union and I have always wanted to be part of it. And so this is the moment I can do it. And, again, I am continuously involved in actor training, also because part of intimacy work is talking about actor training. And I think that being involved with the union is also really helpful when you're training people to act too. So that's kind of my connection there. But acting was the major love of my theatrical career. And I still every once in a while, I'm like, one day I'm going to go back and do that. No. Someone's just got to cast me in a Villanova show. Just exactly. Saying. Just waiting for the right one.
Exactly. Totally. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Instagram question now because you touched on it a little bit. But question from Ryan Henry. How did you get involved with intimacy coordination?
I am delighted to see Ryan Henry's name. Hello, Ryan Henry. So how did I get involved with intimacy coordination? That's such a good question. So I was thinking for a long time when I got to Villanova, they were like, you're going to be involved. We are a producing arm too. And yet I was the only faculty member who had no connection with Villanova theater at all.
Right.
And I had been looking at intimacy choreography for quite a while. And this is something not most people know, but I will correct it here just because I think it's useful to know.
Yeah.
Coordination is mostly a term used for film, and choreography is mostly the term used for live theater. So I've never had any interest in working on film in any capacity, but I shout out to everybody who does. But so choreography, I've been thinking about it for a while because I'm trained in psychology and sociology. I'm trained in theater. I care deeply about people's boundaries and people's, again, we don't use the word safe, but like people's, consent boundaries is really the word you use. So I care a lot about that. And I thought a lot about that in my classes. And then I was looking at how much it costs to get certified. And if you want to go the path of certification with the directors and coordinators, the kind of big union that has a fancy acronym that I'm blanking on right now.
Yeah.
It's about $10,000 to $20,000 if you want to do that, which is nuts. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. But theirs was much more aimed mostly to film. And I took 2 classes with them that were not that expensive. And I was like, these are not my people.
Right.
And then I found theatrical intimacy education, and it's founded by 2 PhDs. And I was like, these people.
You're like, here we go.
they're PhDs, so they work in education and they work in live theater and in their cities and around the country and around the world. And I was like, that's the one for me. So I took a class with them and I was like, these are my people. Got it. So and then they have a very, very sensible and like pedagogically grounded approach. Their terms are really clear. There is less of a boundary to like how much you're paying for these things. So I've now taken about 10, 12 courses with them. And I continue to do that. Again, they're looking for, they don't certify, but they're looking for qualification. Yeah. So you don't obviously want to step in somewhere before you're ready, but at some point
you have to like practice.
And they keep saying, one of my favorite things about them particularly is they always say better is better, right? So you doing it is better than no one doing it, hopefully.
Right.
And, you doing it better than you would have before is better. There is no perfect. There is no, we can't guarantee all the time that it's working. But for our purposes, I was looking around and I was like, I'm here. I can do this. I can be a resource and I can figure out a way to get myself involved with Villanova Theater. And I flat out said that when I was talking to my colleagues. I was like, I just figured out a way to like make myself relevant in what we do. Like that's literally was the goal. That was the goal. So, and I think it's been a fantastic opportunity. I super enjoy getting to be back in a rehearsal room and getting to work with people in this capacity. And I look forward to doing a lot more of it. I'm looking to branch out a little bit in the Philly area. So if folks are watching and want to contact me,
exactly,
I'm around. I'm not around at the moment, but I will be around during the school.
But I will be.
I will be. So, I think if you're interested, you should just start. First of all, you should get the book Staging Sex by Chelsea Pace and Lora Rickard. It's an inexpensive book. We used it in one of my courses this year, and it gives you all of the basics. If you just want to understand the vocabulary, that's so much of it is learning a new way of thinking. And there are just some really basic tenets in there that I think are very helpful. So that's what I would suggest. And then check out Practical Intimacy Education because they're awesome and they won't break the bank and they'll teach you amazing things.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I literally, as soon as you said the title of the book, I was like, cool, I'm going to put that in Google right now. And I'm going to put a link to it in this video afterwards.
Fabulous. It's so
good.
People
can find it.
it's got pictures. It will take you through, like,
that's wonderful.
It's an excellent resource. I mean, it doesn't substitute for the courses, but it's an excellent foundation. And then when you go into a course, you'll have a much better sense of what's up, and you'll know the lingo at least.
Yeah. Well, and it strikes me talking about, like, you've always been like interested in like students, well, their consent, their boundaries, and those kinds of things. And I feel like you set that up really well in the classroom as well, like as a teacher. And so I know you teach both undergrad and graduate students, and I know that's also incredibly interesting because with undergrad students, like, obviously they're like 18 through 21, 22, but then graduate students, it's anywhere from like 23 to like 45 plus. So I'm curious, what's that difference like when teaching undergrad versus graduate students?
Oh, so interesting. That's a great question. It's also tricky because I feel like I teach different disciplines to those folks. So it's a little, that's also fair. A difference. Like, not that acting and theater theory are different disciplines to me. They aren't, but you all have opted in. And not that I'm saying that like students taking an acting class haven't consented. They have, but they don't know what they're consenting to sometimes. Sometimes they do. But we don't have a major, you know, so sometimes we have some minors.
Yeah, it's students outside of their major. So they're like
outside of their major, and 9 times out of 10, they're like, this fulfills the requirement of a fine arts thing. But so it took me a second to kind of figure out how to crack the insanely smart and lovely Villanova students who are also so polite that sometimes getting them to talk and to like goof around with you takes a second. And it takes less time now that I know to expect that, but that's often a thing. So I was teaching acting and intro to gender and women's studies, which is a very different, that legitimately is a different discipline. But, you know, I also, in one of my acting classes last year, had a student who was a high school student. So that was very interesting because obviously I'm also thinking consent wise, I'm like, okay, you know, she is not of age. So she can't, like, we aren't going to have anything where she has to physically engage with anyone, like at all, which, you know, is possible in an acting class. That's not the way that I was taught or that most of us were taught, but all of these things are possible. And I was very conscious of that. And you have to be conscious of the dynamics, especially in an acting class. People are really trusting each other with some vulnerability there. And you've got to set that up and support that.
Truly.
And also set up that like opting out or saying no to something you don't want is encouraged. So for grad students, it's funny because when I first started teaching grad students, my first class, I would say probably there were 9 people. I think a third of them were older than me. A third of them were my age, and then a third of them were younger than me. So it was a very interesting range. And I mean, I always think like, you know, grad students are usually so psyched up to be in the room. In general, you all also know each other pretty well,
which helps.
So it does help. You come into a room where their expectations of how you treat each other are pretty much set. Whereas I mean, I always, though, even in a grad class, I spent an equal amount of time in every class, whether students know it or not, focusing on how to build a cohort, because like I need everybody to know that I've got their back. You know, I can do my best to protect them in this room, and that you've got each other's backs, and that we're here to learn. It's okay to make mistakes, as long as we learn from them. And things like that. So I think in that sense, I set them up similarly. But there are different backgrounds generally for the average undergraduate student at Villanova and the average grad student at Villanova. So a lot of times the undergrads they're younger. They haven't seen as much in the world. Right. So you're spending a little bit of time kind of sometimes pushing them outside of their boundaries in that sense. In healthy ways, hopefully. Or at least asking them to think about things they might never have had to think about before.
Right.
You know, and I think that's good as long as you're aware of what you're signing up for. And for grad students, I think often part of what I'm trying to do in that room is illuminating for you the ways that your brain already works. That's true for undergrads too, but I think it's more important for grad students to know your patterns because you've had more time to get set in those patterns.
Fair.
Where undergrads come in and are like, sometimes, open vessels that want to be like, tell me how to do these things.
Yeah.
And even a grad student who says, tell me how to do these things, which is not my vibe anyway.
No.
It's like, well, how have you been doing it? Right? Like, how have you been doing it? What's working for you about that? What's not? There's not one size fits all when it comes to research, when it comes to acting, when it comes to thinking about any important topic. So my goal as a teacher is the same in the sense that it is to help you figure out your way in, not my way. I know my way already. You can help me learn more things about my way too, but that's not why I'm there. So I think that that's a very philosophical answer, but I think that for grad students, I am much more interested in how you think than what you think. For the undergrads, that's true too, but I'm also more interested in kind of getting them comfortable with the idea that what they think might not be the full story because they might not have been exposed to other ways of thinking. Whereas for the most part, the grad students, you have been exposed to other ways of thinking, but maybe you haven't had a chance to really reflect on how your pathway through that ended up being where it is. And let's just make sure that's the one that's working best for you. And then that's great.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Well, and that it's funny because I was going to talk to you. You teach some really fun and interesting classes. So obviously we talked about acting. We were talking about vision and form, gender and women's studies, but also you taught a true crime class. And I want to give some light to that because I just think that's so stinking cool.
It was so much fun. I've taught it twice now. And 1,000,000 points to Valerie Joyce for everything in life, but especially for me being so one of my students came to me in Intro to Gender and Women's Studies and was like, we always spent the beginning of class talking about true crime podcasts. So shout out to Jake Metzger, who was like, what if we did a course on this?
And you were like,
you're right. Well, I was like, listen, I could always ask. So I asked Travis Foster, who's the head of Gender and Women's Studies, and he's like, totally, but Gender and Women's Studies doesn't offer courses. So you have to, if you can make it a theater course, and Valerie says, yes, you can teach it. Yeah. And so I was like, so Valerie, there's this class. And I was like, the way into this is this. I care about true crime. I care about the way that gender is portrayed in true crime. But really what I'm interested in true crime is how we tell the stories of these crimes.
Right.
And it's that moment that I was like, that's the performance, because actually these stories are performative. And this is performance studies, how we craft a narrative, how we figure out what parts of a story we include and what we don't. That's crucial to how we think about things.
Absolutely.
And the very first, I'll share with you what I do the first day in that class.
Yes.
Which I'll now have to change if I ever do it again in case anyone's watching, but that's okay. I share the case of Sneha Ann Phillip, who is a victim who is officially on the registry of 9/11 victims, but has gone on and off of that registry. She was a medical doctor. She disappeared. The last known sighting of her was on September 10th. And she lived down by the trade centers, but her husband hadn't seen her that night. She didn't have a cell phone. So if I tell people that story, right, that part of the story, I say that, and that is included. I have 4 sheets of paper. That part of the story is included on all 4 sheets. There's a control that only gets that information. And there's another group that gets this track of information, which is she was a medical doctor, but she was on leave at the time that this happened because she had been caught drunk on the job, and she had not gone to her rehab that she was supposed to go to. And she had ended up getting fired from her last job, and she only got hired to the new one on the condition that she would do rehab, which she did not do. So she was struggling a little bit with that. She also, when she got fired from the last job, claimed she got fired because she was a whistleblower, not because she was drunk. And she then she sued them for that. But turns out that case was dropped and she was countersued for libel. And the case that was supposed to be the court hearing the morning of September 11th, which didn't happen. because nothing happened. Court was closed that day.
Yeah.
So that's one track. Next track is she and her husband, she often didn't come home at night. Her husband and her worked opposite shifts. He was also a doctor. He said she really liked to hang out at lesbian bars because she could avoid getting hit on there. Not the place you'd go if you wanted to avoid getting hit on when you're a woman, but okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes she used to go home with friends she met there, and she'd come back the next day. And there's also a part of the story that there was a report that her brother walked in on her and his wife, who wasn't his wife at the time yet, hooking up. So there was a question of like what was going on with her, and maybe is the drinking connected to like her figuring something out about herself. So there's that. And then the third group gets a secret postcard that says, everyone who knew me before 9/11 thinks I'm dead. And it's drawn, and she was paint. She liked to draw and paint as well. And so people found it and were like, oh my God, it's Sneha. She's alive. And of course that's an anonymous art project. It's possible that's true. It's possible that's not. It's supposed to be true, but who knows? So the thing is, if you only get that information, you think you have a sense of what's going on. So I usually ask them, people who eat only those things, okay, what do you think happened? And then they read what everyone has. So now we have everybody's information. And the thing about a missing persons case is we don't know what's important and what's not, because we don't know where she is.
Yeah.
And so what I think is interesting is, depending on what you choose to include, you make the story about something or not.
Yeah.
Because the way that we craft that performs on you. And if I'm telling you she's going to lesbian bars, you're thinking, well, obviously that's important. She went home with someone that she didn't know, and that person, either she died accidentally or that person killed her. Or they ran off and started a new life, which I think is the least likely scenario.
Right.
As you and I probably remember, you might be a little young to remember, but like you couldn't easily get out of the city at that point. Like that was, I don't think personally that she was alive on September 11th at all, but her family really wants to believe that she ran into the towers, which we also know isn't true, because they were turning medical personnel away and sending them to the hospitals. They didn't let anybody up. They were trying to take people out.
Right.
So, so there's a very interesting podcast on this now called Missing on 9/11 that I do recommend if you're interested in this kind of thing. But that really sets the tone for, at the end, the students this year made podcasts or YouTube stories of like little mini documentaries of particular crimes that were underreported and undercovered, which meant that they had intersectional issues at play. Right. So we're not talking about missing white woman syndrome. Yes. So that's important. So and it happened to be going right after the Gabby Petito, not to laugh at the death of Gabby Petito, but like after that's that kind of explosion of people being interested in this missing white woman who was not the only person missing. Right.
And all the social media involved and so on and so forth. Yeah. And like, I was going to play a little clip of another podcast that you were on, KYW News Radio, in depth to talk about it. But I was like, we're talking about so many different things that I want to get to other things in this episode. Totally so fine. I'll make sure to link that below, because that's fun too, because we get to hear kind of like the creation of the class and that kind of thing. But and it was recently announced also that you'll be teaching the inaugural introduction to LGBTQ studies at Villanova in spring of 2023. That's so exciting.
I'm so excited, and I'm so honored that they chose me to do it. It is the first new course that GWS has been able to offer. So it's not offered through English. It's not offered through theater. It's a strictly GWS class, which is super exciting. And major props to Dina Del-Lindenmeyer and the rest of the administration at in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences for recognizing that need and responding to it, which is fabulous. So I am impressed. I am honored, and I'm super curious. I love teaching GWS classes because people are often so interested, and they've had a variety of different interactions with this material. And especially for something like LGBTQ studies, those of us who are queer, it doesn't come with a manual. So you don't often know the history or, it's you figure it out by yourself, and then you kind of are like,
I guess I'll just Google it and try and figure out my history. It's fine. Like,
right. Who came before? And like, it's, you know, it's always fun to be able to do that in a theater path, but the ability to teach that just by itself is really exciting for me. And I've never gotten to do that before. So I'm super excited. And the library at Villanova asked me like, what's that course going to be? And I was like, it's in the spring of 2023.
You're like, come back to me.
Soon enough, I'll know, because I do love to have it planned ahead of time. But the problem is I could teach 5 different versions of that course and never touch the same thing twice.
100%. Well, and I think it's also going to be interesting because being that you've taught women and gender studies, like specifically, I'm curious to like how much then will overlap between the two, or whether, again, as you were saying, there's so much information that like it doesn't touch the other stuff, you know, like.
I think it's going to have very little overlap. Actually, I think at the moment it's going to have, there's one source text that I really love for intro to GWS. And I think they're going to read a different chapter of that in LGBTQ studies.
Nice.
Yeah, because I like to make it so that if you take multiple courses with me, they're not overlapping. So I did the same thing for the what I call the true crime class, the murderinos class. So the murderinos class, I didn't want too much of that to overlap. And that was easy because I was dealing with a lot of sociology and psychology texts.
Yeah.
My proudest moment in that class, I have to tell you, is that the student asking if it would count toward her criminology degree. And she showed it to the sociology department, and they were like, "Yeah, this." They were like, "You just have to tell us next time so that we can actually list it." But they're like, "You're teaching all criminological sociology," and I was like, "Self-trained," and I am validated.
You're like, "I don't have a degree in that." Heck yeah,
I don't have a degree in that, and I don't pretend to at all. But I do know how to research, and I do know how to critically think. So I felt I was like, thanks, criminology department. I see you. But yeah, so for this class, I think I'm most excited actually to touch on media representations, because that's something specifically in the course description. And it's something my students every year, when they get to do their own kind of research projects within Intro to GWS, they so often touch on this.
Yeah.
And I've gotten some really interesting projects about like things I had never noticed before, like the fact that queer women characters on shows are more likely to be BIPOC actors, and therefore more likely not to be the center of the story. Like both of those things coexist, and there's like an entire history, obviously, there. Once that's pointed out, you're like, oh, right, because you want to sideline them, and also you want to say, oh, somehow like this sexual perversion or this fluidity, right, is different, and it's only for it's gross once you figure it out. But you know, it's fascinating to or the bury your gaze trope,
to unpack it,
trope, like to have students being like, this is what I want to spend my time talking about, and it's like, me too, let's do that in class together with a bunch of people. I mean, I do often think that Intro to GWS is sometimes the first time that undergrads have been able to openly talk about queerness, either their own or just in general, in a classroom in college. And that's not only a Villanova thing. Like,
that's just
it just depends on what's being offered and who's teaching it. Like it's, you know, I think actually Villanova does a nice job of that within a small number of courses that count for something like a GWS major or minor. And of course, I am also always trying to to very clearly introduce wording for trans and non-binary people into these contexts, because what I always say to them is like, even if there's no one who's out in this class, statistically, it's likely that you or someone that you know closely falls into one of these categories. And so our job until those people are out is to, and even after they're out, obviously, is to really make sure that by our language, we're saying it's okay. Like we're saying, I understand, I'm educating myself. I care and I see you. And that's so crucial. And I've had students be really grateful for that time after time. And I think, you know, it's the bare minimum we can be doing. And so I'm excited 100%. To see how that part of the conversation gets to be fleshed out a little bit more. in class. And yeah, I am consistently very impressed with the undergrads, and how willing they are to talk about these things, even if they really don't know about them beforehand. And that scares them sometimes. They like to know, I had a student one time say to me, a student in my acting class who wanted to take another class with me, and was like, I don't think I can take intro to GWS with you because I don't know anything about it.
You're like, that's why it's intro.
I was like, the same way you took fundamental principles of acting, you didn't know anything about that. That was okay. Same thing. Like, I don't care. You just have to be willing. That's all. I can give you all the rest. I can give you the terminology, and then you get to figure out, what do you think about this stuff? That's all.
Yeah, no, it's so important. And I love that. You're like reminding, it's like, hey, this is intro. Like, literally just come in being willing to do the thing, and you're good. You're fine. Let's go. Let's have fun.
You don't come in the first day and I'm like, by the way, what do you know about Stonewall? And tell me like, okay, so you're a feminist, name every woman. Like, right? Like, and you say Whitney Houston and you pass the class. No. But yeah, I mean, I really think part of the fun of being a teacher is if someone comes to you with the enthusiasm and you have some of the framework and information together, you watch people blossom and learn that they do have enough information to really state how they feel about certain things in a, grounded way, which I think is really great. And, I love nothing more than to hear them say, that they have conversations with their friends or their parents about these issues, not debates, but just like, here's what I'm learning.
Yeah.
And that's so cool. Cause I think that shows a good class when you're talking about it afterwards. And I do the same thing. I'm like, today in class, to all my friends.
Literally, like, this is like partially a segue, but also true too. Like, even like talking about stage directions and your way of interpreting them, like getting to learn about affective stage directions for me was very much that thing of like, this is so stinking cool. I want to tell my other theater friends about this because I feel like none of us are talking about stage directions. And luckily enough, here you are, the one of the few people in the world who is like, this is my specialty. And you have a book that came out this past October. I mean, I know we only have like a few minutes, but like, how was it to completely like not only work on affective stage directions, but put together a whole book? Like,
it was really fun. Normally I would have a prop, but I did a book exchange with a senior scholar who was at this conference.
Do I have it here on my shelf?
No, it's okay.
It might be in Harry's backpack, but anyway.
It's okay. We'll pretend it's here. You'll just like Photoshop it in over my face.
Just like, just pretend this is the book. Like,
yes, exactly that. So, I mean, the book came out of my dissertation work, but I wrote it from scratch, really, not entirely from scratch. Some of the intro is the same, but otherwise I rewrote basically all of it. And it's funny because when you're faced with writing something like a dissertation first, you're like, I'm writing something that's like 250 to 300 pages. How do you do that? And the funny thing is you do it just the way you do any other kind of writing. Actually, you just have a ton more to say. Like, I mean, I gave my first chapter to my dissertation supervisor, shout out Annette Sadek. And she was like, that's cute that you think that's a chapter, but like, why aren't you writing the way that I know you write? Like, it's a 5-paragraph essay. It's just longer. And I was like, you're right. I thought it had to be something completely different because it was a dissertation.
Yeah.
And then I fell into the same trap when I wrote the first chapter of my book, and I shared it with someone, and I was like, why am I pretending that I don't know how? Like, I know how to write. I know that there's a structure, and I just need to follow it, and it will be okay. And I just have a lot of information, and that's okay. So I really tried to approach it piecemeal because you can't think of writing a book, for me at least. I think of writing.
There's no way.
And the chapters are like a big, long essay. And that I can do. I love an article. I love an essay, like an article length essay. Like, I can do that. And then there's more connective tissue, obviously, but otherwise it's pretty much the same thing. And so that was a real joy. And because my dissertation had only been focused on 6 playwrights and the book covered any American playwright,
so much more to work with.
It was so much more work, but it let me, it freed me because I mean, I needed to do that deep study of like reading every single play those people had written for the dissertation to identify the categories. Mm-hmm. But once that was done, then I could just pick the examples I liked, which was fun because I could say, you know, these are the most extreme ones. You can walk them back to whatever examples you want to apply them to, but here are the ones that come to mind for me. And like, mm-hmm. also let me introduce you to all these cool playwrights that, you know, who you might not have encountered before, like all these cool ways of working. So that was the benefit for me. And I am pretty sure, I believe this to be true, mm-hmm. that I am one of the first people to publish scholarship on James, actually, because of that.
That's true. Yeah.
And the plays in there aren't even, one of them's not even published. Tank Stranger is not published. But
you're like, but I've read his work, so
well, I was like, can you give me everything you've ever written? Thank you. And he was being James was like, here is all of it.
Here's everything.
Here's everything. And let's chat about it. And I actually had him read the stuff that's about his work. And I was like, let me know how you feel about that. Like, do you feel I'm misrepresenting you? Do you feel, you know, what does it speak to you in terms of resonating with what you think you're doing? And
right.
And it did. And luckily, you know, I am so grateful every day that I get to work and think with James as a friend and colleague.
James
Imes, the one and only Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, James Imes.
I still love saying that.
It's really fun to say. I've seen it for the second time on Wednesday, so I'm very pumped about that.
Oh my gosh, so fun.
But yeah, so it was a really awe-inspiring project for anyone to kind of face down a book. I am very proud of the thing that I ended up with. And I'm now like, great. Now I know how to write a book, I guess. I know how to write one book.
Yes.
Now I'm thinking of other books. So that's pretty fun.
Exactly.
And yeah. And also I am so tickled every time I hear someone talk about having read it. I'm like, it's so nice that people read it sometimes. It's, you know, I wrote it. I was the only one that read it for quite a while.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And this is all. Yeah, exactly. And this is a very unfair question, but I was like, I have to ask because we're here. At the moment, it doesn't have to be your favorite overall, but do you have like a favorite affective stage direction, like in your mind at the moment?
Well, I mean, again, my obvious favorite is the one that I start the book with, which is the lines from The Clean House that really gave me the idea. Mm-hmm. The ones where Lane and Virginia experience it for a moment. Lane and Virginia experience a primal moment in which they are 7 and 9 years old inside of their own heads, respectively. They are mad. Then they return to language as adults do. I love that one. Mm-hmm. But I also, let me think of another one. Well, there is a fantastic one from Youth that James had, that he has these ways of scripting awkward silence, and it's just written out is awkward. And I love that. And like, then there's other ones that are like, it's more awkward. And it's so, it's got such a point of view and a perspective. And there's such a particular kind of awkwardness that brings up for me. But yeah, I'm currently writing a performance review of James's Reverie that was at Azuka Theater. So I've been spending a lot of time with that script, and that one also has some really beautiful moments for silence and for awkwardness. And the other one that comes to mind that I love is there's a Lisa D'Amour wrote this play called Hideaway. I think that's Hidetown.
Hidetown. Okay.
Hidetown. Yeah. And it has these things in it called Texas pauses. And the first time she writes it, she's like, a Texas pause, meaning at any moment, someone could walk in and start a conversation, but they don't. And I love that. I love that.
That's a new one on me that I just love.
Several times I'm like, I'm going to direct that play one day just because I want to play with that. Like,
I want to know what a Texas pause feels like.
Yeah, I think I know what it feels like, but I want to know how you make it look like that, right?
Yeah.
How you make it look like someone could be coming, but they're not. And I think it's possible.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's possible, but yeah, so those are just some ones that are living in my mind right now as like particularly amazing ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are so
many. Every time I go to the drama bookstore shop, I get like a bunch of plays and I just scan through and I'm like, do you have stage directions? I'm all like, good.
Well, and then thinking about that, I I was reading further in your Falvey Library interview, and that you're looking at another solo book project coming up, having to do with like with young women, correct?
Yeah.
On stage. And I'm so excited for this, specifically because of the plays that I know we've both read, be it in and out of class. So I know how passionate you are, and I can imagine Dance Nation is definitely quite a part of it. But I'm curious as to like what other plays you're possibly looking at.
Well, that's such a good question. And yeah, I mean, you're responsible for giving me, what is it? Dryland.
Dryland.
Is that the
one?
Dryland. The subset of abortion plays, if we want to call them that, but of course not just that.
Yeah.
I wrote an article version of this that's currently in peer review that focuses on The Wolves, Dance Nation, If Pretty Hurts, Ugly Must Be a Motherfucker, Schoolgirls or the African Mean Girls play, and one more that I'm blanking on right now. That's not fun. Okay. There is another one, but I think that it's very interesting because I was getting this idea around the same time that Yellow Jackets was on TV.
Okay.
And there are a couple plays that were coming up that were about young girls. I just saw The Bedwetter off Broadway because it also features a teenage girl. And I have this idea that I think we do not give teenage girls we haven't historically given teenage girls much of a shot on stage. And I think this is not just true for girls. I think this is true for non-boys as well.
Yeah.
So I would love for that to also be a part of this. The sample size is going to need to grow a lot. I am in very preliminary research. And when I talk to a publisher about it, because I'm that person who doesn't fully have the idea yet, but I'm like, I have to talk to someone.
Yeah.
The publisher recommended that I also would have to look at media representation. So I'd also need to look in film and TV, which is just fine by me. And I also love to look at music videos as another way of talking about representations. So I think what it's probably going to be is, I think it's probably going to be done by archetype. And what I think particularly, and what I argue in this essay, is that there are particular archetypes of teenage girls. There are tenets to how they have been allowed to behave. And then there are contemporary playwrights, a lot of women of color, a lot of particularly Black women playwrights, and queer playwrights in general are writing different versions of this, different ways for girls to interact, different ways for stories involving girls to go. And I think that that's all super, super important. And we just can't get away from the children's hour and the Crucible. They're like messing us up a lot. And I think those are white girls can't even be portrayed well. So like everybody else is already off to a bad start.
Right.
We all know people like white girls, culturally are more willing to, again, back to Missing White Woman Syndrome, or like Jessica in the Well in the 1980s, right? Like that should be the identity group that we give grace to culturally, and we're not doing that either. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what I find. If you know of a play that has an interesting or terrible representation of teenage girls, please contact me. I would love to read it. I might be angry after I read it, but I will be very happy to know about it so that I can either hold it up or crush it.
Absolutely. No, that's amazing. And I'm so excited to talk to you more about it, like away from this episode as well, and things like that. But yeah, we've come to the end of this episode. It's been so much fun chatting. Where can people find you, like on the internet and things like that? Or theater scholarship?
Theater scholarship, you can literally Google me. You can Google Scholar Me. I'm all my work is there. You can find me on academia with my name. I am on Instagram. My book is on Instagram as Lines Between Lines. The word between doesn't have any E's in it. And there's also a website, the linesbetweenthelines.com is the website for the book. And you can also find it on University of Michigan Press. Basically, if you Google me, you'll find most of the things there.
Yes.
I am pretty active on Instagram. That's my biggest thing. And my private Instagram is @simplythebess. So
it's such
if
a
I
good
know
name.
I will approve you. It is private. But yeah, awesome. This was so much fun. Thank you so much, Lora. This was a complete joy.
Absolutely. And really quick to plug my own socials, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Lora_Marjoram. My website, www.loramarjoram.com. You can find this show on Instagram at Overtures Show. There's 2 S's. That's where I post all the upcoming updates of like guests coming up. That's where you can submit questions. You can find out about the guests before they come on and all that fun, good stuff. If you're on YouTube and you're watching this episode, congrats, you found the YouTube. Subscribe, comment, join us live, say hi. It's a grand old time that we have here. And then I'm also publishing things to Spotify and Apple Music now. So catch up on the backlog there as well as on YouTube. So whether you're at home and on the go, not to sound like a commercial, but those are the different ways you can listen and all that fun stuff. Next stream, TBD, still figuring out timing and things like that, but it's looking like I might have some more Villanova people on, maybe some alumni that I haven't actually met, which will be really fun and great to talk to people. So follow on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube to get reminders, all that good things. But Bess, do you have any final thoughts for viewers live in the future?
Oh my goodness. Go out and be your best selves. I don't know.
No, I love that. That's perfect. That's it. That's all we need. Amazing. So with that, thank you everyone who's listening and watching, and I hope you have a good day.